safe room in Israel. He's a historian and scholar of religion, University of Haifa. He's been specializing in the 19th, 20th century British and North American history, and his 2020 book, Women and Gender Issues in British Paganism, 1945 to 1990, focused on gender and alternative spirituality. But he's recently turned to book history, brings him here, researching British esoteric bookshops from the 1890s to the 1990s. Covering the period between the founding of Watkins Books and the rise of the internet. Watkins Books came out about, was it 130 years ago? 100 and, yeah. But his project explores how these bookshops serve as arenas for the production and distribution of rejected knowledge during that era, probably mapping out the networks that supported those establishments and relied on those establishments. So I'll pass over to Shai now.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here virtually and in this research network and present my findings from my ongoing research. So what I want to do today is basically to share with you some insights from an ongoing research project here, which focuses on the history of occult and New Age spirituality bookshops in Britain. And it aims to illuminate their function as hubs and arenas for the production and exchange of what we term rejected knowledge. And I'm going to speak about this a bit later. Yeah, so rejected knowledge within these respective milieus, yeah, from around the 1890s to the 1990s. Now, I chose this this time frame, and I'm just gonna share my screen here. Yeah, just let me know if you can actually see it, okay? Yeah, we all good? Okay. Yeah, so basically I chose the time frame of this study. The time frame is basically mostly dictated by the founding of Watkins, the first and presently the oldest bookshop in London to dedicate itself specifically to occult and esoteric literature, and by the rise of the internet, which has become the chief arena for the exchange of relevant knowledge, thus eliminating the primacy and, in the case of occult subcultures, sometimes even the very exclusivity of the bookshop. Now, the allure of the esoteric bookshop has been established as early as the 1840s with the publication of Edward Bulwer Lytton's famous occult novel, Zanoni. Mr. D, the occult bookseller mentioned in the introduction of Zanoni, was actually John Denley, who had acquired Ebenezer Sibley's extensive occult papers and library in the early part of the 19th century. And Denley loaned the books to the occultist Francis Barrett, who was born in 1774. Yeah, so what we are talking about is actually late 18th century, sorry. And Francis Barrett, in turn, utilized them in his production of the Magus, or the Magus, yeah, a seminal tome that provided a crucial connection between the Hermetic literature of the Renaissance period and the revival of British occultism during the 19th century. Almost a century after the publication of Zanoni, the famed British occultist Violet Firth, aka Dion Fortune, entrusted the esoteric training and mentoring of the protagonist of her novel, The Goat Food God, which came out in 1936, in the hands of the fictional old bookseller T. Jelks, whose rare and occult bookshop formed the premise for many of the novel's early chapters. Fortune, who self-consciously constructed her novels as tools that would provide the casual reader with a foray into occultism, would have drawn her inspiration for Jelks's bookshop from two very real occult and esoteric bookshops that operated in London during the interwar period in which he was writing these books. Yeah, so one of them was Watkins Books. Yeah, well, Watkins Books. Sorry, I have a problem here with the presentation. I'm just gonna try again. Sorry about that. And if not, we'll find a way to solve it somehow. Yeah. um, yeah, so there we are. Yeah. Watkins Books, established around 1893 to 1897. It depends on how you look at it, by John M. Watkins, who was a close friend of the theosophist Madame Helena Blavatsky. And on the right here, you can see the Atlantis Bookshop, founded in 1922 by a Jewish-born occultist named Michael Houghton. Yeah, his real name was Michael Horvitz. So that's Michael Houghton here. Now, you might have noticed the photo here of Mr. Ollivander. Yeah, John Hurt as Mr. Ollivander. That's because up until like the past year or so, I didn't have any photographs of John M. Watkins and his son Jeffrey Watkins, who ran that bookshop. So I always imagined them as, you know, as Mr. Ollivander. Yeah, but now we can actually see how they looked like. So here we can see John M. Watkins, and yeah, and there we have Jeffrey Watkins, who continued the tradition of esoteric bookselling after his father passed away in 1947. So uh, basically, these were virtually the only establishments to uh, specialize in esoteric books until the 1960s. And Watkins and Atlantis were frequented by early and mid 20th century occult luminaries who were active in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and its successor lodges. So people like Samuel Leader McGregor Mathers, William Butler Yeats. I have like a slide of all of these people here, but for some reason my presentation is acting up. So what we're gonna do is something like this. Okay, instead of actually showing it as a slideshow, I'm just gonna share the screen in this way, and we're gonna have no problems from now on. Yeah. So yeah, so here you can see hopefully some of the characters that I'm mentioning. Yeah. So we can see here, yeah, William Butler Yeats. Yeah, where are you? There you are. Yeah. And Arthur Edward White and Aleister Crowley. We have the Unfortunate herself, who we already mentioned, and as well as people like Gerald Gardner, the founder of Wicca, and Ross Nichols, who promoted modern Druidry. So all of these people would congregate in these bookshops, yeah, in Watkins and in Atlantis. Now, by the late 60s and early 70s, alternative and radical bookshops like Compendium began to stock volumes on occultism and especially on New Age spirituality in response to the rise of the counterculture and the hippie movement. And during the 1970s and 80s, many new bookshops dedicated to occult and New Age spirituality were formed in large cities and small towns throughout the UK. Some bookshops, like the Leeds-based The Sorcerer's Apprentice yeah, which you can see here, focused um, specifically on occult and esoteric literature, occultique in Northampton as well, yeah, while others, such as the Gothic Image in Glastonbury, had a more general New Age and alternative bent. By the late 1980s and mid 90s, however, market conditions have changed, and many of these establishments, together with other independent bookshops in general, as you know, fell victim to the success of chains such as Waterstones and the rise of the internet. And of course, another game changer for independent small booksellers in general was the demise of the netbook agreement, which regulated the prices of new books since the end of the 19th century. So many of these independent booksellers, both occult and otherwise, found it impossible to compete with supermarkets and large chains in the subsequent age of price cutting, as we all know here. So my research highlights, my project basically highlights that age of primacy, yeah, for occult and New Age spirituality bookshops before the arrival of the internet, and focuses on their centrality and, as I said, in the case of occult bookshops, even exclusivity as arenas for the exchange and transition of knowledge within these respective subcultures between the early 1890s and early 1990s. And indeed, I will aim to show how these literary establishments were simultaneously dependent on and cultivated a large array of occult and New Age spirituality networks during that era. Now, first, it must be noted that up until the 1960s, esoteric bookshops were among the only places in which British occultists could meet with their fellows in a semi-public atmosphere, considering the conservative nature of early to mid 20th century British society. And that was especially true for practitioners whose spiritual paths and practices could have been considered illegal according to the Witchcraft Act of 1735 and its successor, the Fraudulent Medium Act of 1951, which was eventually repealed in 2008. So I can just show you an example, yeah, of what I'm talking about here. In 1888, sorry, in 1889, Robert H. Fryer, a Bath-based bookseller and publisher, was charged with the possession of obscene literature, which was confiscated from his shop by Inspector Denin of Scotland Yard. Hundreds of the books were consequently destroyed. Bill Butler, the proprietor of Brighton's Unicorn Books, suffered a similar fate during a well-known trial as late as 1968. These issues subsided as the new decade began, yeah, but soon a new problem emerged as certain Christian groups began to feel anxious in the face of the rise of alternative forms of spirituality and the rising interest in the occult. They would occasionally express their opposition to the prospects of a new occult bookshop opening up in a small town, and in some cases even picketed outside existing shops. And the most extreme case occurred in 1989 at the height of the Satanic Panic years when Astonishing Books, the second and very visible Leeds branch of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, was firebombed following a vicious media campaign, and that specific bookshop subsequently closed down. So The bookshops which catered to the needs of British occultists um, and to those adherents of various other alternative forms of New Age spirituality, stocked not only the relevant tomes and volumes, but housed related published pamphlets and and booklets as well, in addition to a plethora of small magazines produced by and for occult and alternative communities. These bookshops usually contained notice boards upon which various occult lodges announced vacancies and were in turn scoured by would-be neophytes in search of a group or an individual that would provide a much coveted initiation. These pairings were many times facilitated with the help of the bookshop proprietors themselves, whose establishments provided the only means, say for magazine ads, for seekers to locate relevant groups in their area prior to the rise of the internet. Bookshops were often the site for relevant workshops, lectures, book signings, and in the case of the Atlantis Bookshop, yeah, in Museum Street, right next to the British Museum, it even contained an occult temple in the basement that was used by occult lodges for ritual purposes. Yeah, today it's mostly used for lectures and stuff like that, so you can actually go down there. Um, in addition to all of the above activities that characterize the bookshop as a physical geographical space, many bookshop proprietors produce their own newsletters. Yeah. Yeah, so we can see here like a couple of examples. Yeah, right here. So they produce their own newsletters and in-house magazines, which could carry their message beyond the four walls of their establishment. And several of them also acted as publishers of original books on occultism and New Age spirituality. So my research therefore attempts to map the grid of relevant bookshops that existed during the time frame that I've mentioned between the early 1890s to early to mid 1990s, as well as to chart the various networks concerned with what we term rejected knowledge, that were supported by these institutions. Now, by rejected knowledge, I mean, basically, it's a term referring to a combination of alternative religion and speculative science that have been deemed irrelevant and superstitious by modern Western culture. And Wouter Hanegraaff's book, Esotericism and the Academy, Rejected Knowledge in Western Culture, is a very good place to start if you want to learn more about that. I furthermore plan to analyze possible differences in ways between in the ways in which bookshops and networks built around them operated in a metropolitan center like London, with its size and appeal as the UK's intellectual and cultural capital, and in major cities like Edinburgh, Birmingham, Bristol, or Leeds, in smaller provincial towns such as Cheltenham and Bath, and also in the New Age hub of Glastonbury, all of which have hosted important relevant bookshops. So I've compiled like this rudimentary map of the location and national distribution of occult and New Age spirituality bookshops in Britain between the late 19th century and the early 1990s. But okay, so how does one gain knowledge of these bookshops? Yeah, how did these bookshops came to my attention? Um, in addition to dedicated directories that were published by and for members of the local occult milieu during the 1970s and 80s, and you can see examples of them here. The British book trade also, as a whole, regularly published bookshop directories during the latter half of the 20th century. So a thorough analysis of these provides us with documentation of the major events of a shop's life. Yeah. And you can see an example, yeah, here, the founding date, the changes in dress, proprietors, opening hours, specialities, all the way down to its sometimes, eventual demise, either entirely or by virtue of downgrading into a storeroom or a mail order business operating from a private residence. Yeah, and so the mail order businesses are going to have to be someone else's problem. Yeah, I'm not going to tackle them in this research. So maybe I'm going to do it some other day. Yeah, but that's going to have to wait. So most of the like 50 plus relevant establishments that were located and were founded and operated. Um, oh yeah, there we are. Yeah, so most of the 50 plus relevant establishments that I found were basically founded and operated between the 1960s and 1980s, while six or seven or maybe up to 10, if we include all the theosophical bookshops, were established during the late Victorian and interwar periods. Of course, not all of these bookshops will be featured at length in my study, as some establishments, would not yield significant archival data for me to work with, or maybe they will prove to be short-lived businesses that had minimal impact on the occult and New Age scene of the day. My research basically relies mostly on the textual analysis of materials that were produced, distributed, and sold at these relevant bookshops, like books, pamphlets, newsletters, magazines, brochures, notices regarding events, and other ephemera. Um, Memoirs of key individuals who took part in these distinct subcultures are also examined, as well as available archives of specific bookshops, which is really hard to find. The last point, really posits a significant challenge, as in the case of the most important and long-lived shops, Watkins and Atlantis, the archives of these shops were discarded during the 1980s when ownership changed hands several times. So I'm therefore forced to rely on the occasional letter, or invoice, um, um, piece of ephemera, found in public and private um, archives and libraries, mostly in the UK, but sometimes as far as South Africa and the west coast of Canada. Yeah. So the only case where we have one alternative or occult bookshop that has its whole archive that has been preserved is Unicorn Books from Brighton. Yeah, we have like 21 boxes worth of an archive to work with. But that's basically it. So in lieu of the lack of full shop archives, some sets of sources must become more prominent, in order to help supplement the rather scant data available. Yeah, so catalogs, for instance, become more important, and we can see here a couple of examples. Yeah, from Atlantis and Watkins. So catalogs are important not only because they allow to monitor trends and prices by using digital humanity tools and understand the ways in which relevant bookshops marketed their products and presented occult texts, but also because they sometimes contain editorials written by the shop's proprietors, alerting their clientele to changes in address, opening hours, shop layout, new merchandise, etc. The same, of course, can be said when we're talking about the house zines published by these bookshops. So here we have The Lamp of Thoth, which was published by the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And on the right, you can see Sut Anubis, which was published by Occultic from New Hampton, from Northampton. Yeah, so through these zines, we can learn more about the proprietors' views and the musings on the issues relevant to the occult milieu, as well as to basically get to know the groups of people who repeatedly contributed articles, opinion pieces, and letters, thereby forming a community around the bookshop. And in addition, we can also find, bits of information in zines produced for the wider esoteric community. Yeah, so the wider esoteric zine scene has proved full of references to bookshops, either in the form of ads, as you can see here, or mentions. People are writing editorials or letters in the zine mentioning visits to the various shops, in the letters, in the reviews, etc. And the bookshop's publishing arms are also examined in my research, and I'm setting up a database covering each shop and its imprint. Some bookshops published only a few books and pamphlets. Others published a few dozen. But in the case of Watkins, we're talking about hundreds upon hundreds of books in various editions as well. So probably up to 400 or something like that, which I've examined so far. And the thing is that each of these books, each of these copies, has to be physically examined, by hand. You have to actually touch it and see it, in order to glean details that are not usually found in your typical library catalog, such as the name of the printer, the amount of copies for a limited edition. Are there any ads for the other books published by the by the shop in the front matter and matter pages, on the dust jacket, everything, I'm also interested in the visual side of bookseller stamps and stickers and logos and their evolution throughout a shop's lifespan. You can see here examples from Watkins throughout the century of their existence. Another set of materials that is utilized throughout my research are ethnographic studies into occult and New Age spirituality subcultures in Britain that were produced during the 70s and through the early 90s. So here you can see a very noted example, Tanya Luhrmann's Persuasions of the Witch's Craft, which came out in 1989 and is based on the PhD research that she carried out in London mostly during the early 1980s. Another thing that I'm doing is interviews. I'm also conducting interviews with surviving relevant bookshop owners, employees, patrons, which at times can also aid in securing access to their privately held archives. So in this example, you can see Geraldine Baskin, the owner of the Atlantis Bookshop, and on the right, you can see Geraldine during the early 70s standing in front of the shop. So if we're talking about about archives, yeah, there's another example of what sort of materials you can work with. Yeah, here you can see a photo of Doreen Valiente. Yeah, Doreen Valiente, who was highly influential in the rise of Wicca. She worked in tandem with its founder, Gerald Gardner. She passed away in 1999. Fortunately, the foundation that was set up to commemorate her legacy, the Doreen Valiente Foundation, granted me access to her meticulous notebooks spanning several decades between the 1950s and 1980s. And these proved to be full of references to visits to occult bookshops, what books she read there, she bought there, gossiping with the proprietor, etc. Loads of stuff in these notebooks that you can see here. Um, yeah, some archives I'm still hoping to gain access to. Yeah, the Theosophical Society archive in Anglia is just as I was beginning my research, they're building. They started to renovate their building. Yeah, so their library and archive is just unavailable. I'm really hoping that maybe soon it will. I'm hoping to gain access somehow to the archive of the Pagan Federation, for instance, all kinds of archives like this. Okay, so why is this important? Yeah, despite the increasing popularity of occult, New Age, and related forms of alternative spirituality in Western societies, especially since the 1960s, we know very little about the history, the production, and distribution in the form of books and other publications of rejected knowledge by these new religious movements. So this project, I hope, is vital for understanding the proliferation of new and alternative religions in Western societies, as before the advent of the internet, these spiritual movements relied upon material networks of book production and distribution in order to communicate their message and gain adherence. So the study of occult publishers in the 19th century Britain, it's still in its infancy. And when it comes to the 20th century to date, there are virtually no monographs or academic articles that focus specifically on the importance of relevant bookshops, either in that era, and especially during the fin de siècle period, or during the later 20th century. By the way, a notable exception, yeah, to that is Susan Newcomb's treatment of Watkins Books and the Atlantis Bookshop as part of her wider study of yoga in Britain. Yeah, that's the name of that book, Yoga in Britain. She deals a lot with the publishing side of it. Yeah, so really, really interesting stuff there. Yeah, with Penguin and Ryder and all kinds of other publishers. Yeah. So what I'm hoping that this project would do is to open a new line of wider historiographical inquiry with the UK as a test case, and thus maybe it has the potential of answering um, long-standing questions regarding the material availability of occult and New Age reading materials during the 20th century and their impact on wider British and Western society. So, it has the potential to contribute to intellectual and cultural history, the history of the book, and of knowledge transfers, and of course, the history of British occultism and New Age spiritualities. And I think that maybe that's about it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Shai. I've scribbled so many notes down, and I can see that Eben's left us a few questions in the chat as well, which I will ask. But welcome, Gail. I didn't get a chance to say hello. Has anybody got any questions? I'm guessing Gail will have. Yes, I knew she would. Gail, would you like to answer the first question for Shai?
You know me so well. Yes, this was very interesting, Shai. I've done a lot of research myself into radical and alternative bookshops and so on. And what struck me is the big overlap, really.
Yeah.
Well, in many ways. So yeah, I mean, I've likewise got, general sort of questions, but I'll just mention one thing I was particularly struck by. You mentioned that in I think it was 1989, there was a satanic panic, which I didn't know about, but that there was the firebombing of the Leeds shop. Now, there was round about that same time, there was firebombing of black bookshops and News from Nowhere, which was a radical anarchist lefty bookshop in Liverpool. And I just wondered whether that was all part of that same thing or it was separate. Yes, well, okay, let's start with that question, because I think, I'm just generally interested in the overlap, really.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, your chapter in the Cambridge History of the Books,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, was very helpful. Yeah,
Yeah.
and there are also new books, at least one that was published about the radical bookstore scene in North America, which was also
Yeah.
very interesting. Came out very recently. Yeah, so basically, yeah, all of this was overlapping. Yeah, Christian fundamentalist groups and fascist groups were pissed off about, radical bookshops and about occult bookshops, and took the same measures to try to stop them. Yeah, so that was all happening at the same time, and the people who I'm following were aware of that. Yeah, they were saying, yeah, this is exactly what they do to the radical bookshops. Yeah, yeah. Um, the basically the I just want to say that all these studies that have been appearing in recent years about other like specialist bookshops in the 20th century, the radical bookstores, yeah, and the feminist bookstores, and obviously the modernist bookshop scene, yeah, all of this was very, very helpful for me to gain also some context and inspiration. Yeah, so this is just wonderful. Gail, you wanted to ask more questions after the first one?
Well, I mean, it was more, yeah, I suppose I am just, well, I mean, yeah, on a human level, I'm actually quite interested in what made you interested in that topic. Oh yes, I've only got one other concrete question, and then I'd be really interested to hear what other people's questions were. Now, I think you've sort of answered this. You were saying that your research relies mostly on material that was produced by the shops. Yes, I think it was a question about, you were saying, I was interested in archives, I suppose, because archives is another big issue that we all share. I mean, obviously the Publishers Archive in Reading flitted through my mind, but that doesn't have much by the way of alternative stuff.
Oh, it actually does, yeah, because some of the publishers you know, they were publishing, you know, stuff about esotericism, and they were later,
Yeah.
you know, subsumed by other bigger publishers. Yeah, so their archives are
Uh-huh.
actually at Reading. Yeah, so I've been there, and just it's a gold mine. Yeah,
It is indeed,
yeah.
yes. Okay, thanks.
Shai, do you want to answer Gail's other question? Because I think we'd all perhaps be interested in that. What drew you to this
Oh yeah,
topic
sure.
in the first place? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that. It's gonna take a couple of minutes. So if there are other questions that you want to ask first, yeah.
Shall we leave that as a teaser then? Eben has got an obvious one, being based in Wales. I think the minute he saw your map, you can
Yeah.
guess what's coming. Do you have any thoughts about the total lack of these bookshops in Wales? Is Eben's question.
Yeah. So obviously, I've been trying to think about that as soon as the map really came together. And by the way, you can see almost the same situation in Scotland and also in East Anglia, for instance. Yeah. Nothing
Oh,
there
that's
for some reason. I'm hoping that, you know, people who are actually from the UK would have insights about that. Maybe because it was more working class. I don't know. I really have no idea. Or less large cities, yeah, other than Norwich or something. So, but basically, yeah, Wales, it's a stark difference. So you don't see anything, not in Cardiff, for instance, not in Aberystwyth. Yeah, you would think, okay, it's a university town. Yeah, maybe something would be there. No, nothing in Wales. I'm assuming it's because of the relatively rural nature. Although, you know, Cornwall, for instance, is also
No.
rather
Yeah.
rural, and there were a few bookshops in Cornwall and Devon during the 70s and 80s. Yeah. In the case of Scotland, that's basically the same. Other than mostly Edinburgh and a bit in Glasgow. And by the way, I've written. This is probably going to be the first product of this research. Is like an anthology chapter that I've written for a book that's going to be published by the Edinburgh University Press about like the well, my chapter is about esoteric book selling in Scotland during the 20th century. So most of the stuff there was actually based around the Theosophical Society. Yeah. But you can see that from the map, for instance, that outside of you know, Edinburgh and Glasgow, nothing. Yeah, not in relevant large cities, even like Aberdeen, yeah, or medium-sized cities, you know, or Dundee or places like that. And I it's I can tell you, for instance. What my guess is. A lot of people would travel, would make the trip. I mean, for most of the 20th century, yeah, the people who would buy this kind of literature are from the middle class and above. And if you're based in Dundee or in or maybe in Aberdeen, you're probably gonna make the trip, if that's important, to the Theosophical Bookshop in Edinburgh. Or of course, you can order stuff through the catalog. Yeah. Um, 2 years ago, when I was doing um, like yeah, I was invited to do this same presentation at the University of Edinburgh, and like the day afterwards, the Theosophical Society in Edinburgh, you know, they set up like another presentation of mine on something else, like on magic in Judaism, in ancient Judaism. So, and they told me, yeah, it was a full house, yeah. And they told me people came from as far as Dundee. Yeah. So, you know, even today, you know, people are gonna make that journey from Dundee to
Yes.
Edinburgh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's mostly in England, the bookshops. Yeah. A few in Scotland, nothing in Wales, one in Belfast in the late 80s, early 90s. That's it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm. Okay, we'll challenge Eben then when he watches this to come up with some reasons. If I can just ask his other question, and then I can see Matt's come online, so I'm guessing that means Matt's got a question at the ready.
I do. Yeah.
It's a second predictable question for Eben. As you know, he's done research on books about bookshops, so he wants to know if you can give us any more information about the Goat Foot God as a bookshop novel.
Oh well, the Goat Food God is basically a story about there are two main characters here, a male one and a female character, and it's a story of initiation, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the person who helps all of this to come to fruition is this old
Sure.
bookseller, the fictional bookseller T. Jelks, which, by the way, I mean, in all of those bookshop directories, the British book trade directories that I went through, yeah, in some period in time, maybe it was the 60s or 70s, there was actually um, there was actually a mail order business that called himself by that name, T Jelks. Yeah, so it was obviously a reference to that book.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very interesting read. It's not her only novel. Yeah, and she, as I said, she really wrote them in order to like rekindle something for the seeker that doesn't even know that they are a seeker. Yeah, and somehow they will find, the Atlantis Bookshop or Watkins or something which will help them find her occult society, which was actually meeting during the 1930s and 40s and carrying out the same rituals basically that are
Mhm.
in these novels.
Oh, okay. So definitely one to look up.
Hmm.
Thank you, Shai. Matthew.
Well, my question actually kind of pertains to slightly outside your time period of focus, but I hope the question gets at something. I've been very interested in Arthur Conan Doyle's Psychic Bookshop,
Yeah.
mostly because of Doyle himself, but also just kind of this trend of people starting bookshops rooted behind causes in the interwar period. But that's kind of a side issue. But I guess the question is, when he advertised its opening in Light magazine, he promoted it as like the only bookshop dealing in the occult, which it was quickly pointed out in the pages of the journal that's like, what the hell is he talking about?
Yeah.
Here are like 5 other addresses. So but it kind of, I mean, not getting into his psychology, I guess I was wondering how well all these kind of various entities were networked and kind of in communication with each other, or do you have a sense of this
Yeah,
at
yeah,
all?
he would have known that Watkins are in business. Yeah, maybe he
Yeah.
wouldn't. He probably didn't know about the Atlantis Bookshop because they were just only starting and were really, really small time back then, in the 20s. Yeah. But yeah, he would have been familiar with Watkins and the Theosophical Bookshop in Edinburgh and in London. Yeah, maybe you could, excuse him by saying, okay, maybe this was the first one. He meant that this was the first one to mainly deal with spiritualism and psychic phenomena.
Okay.
Maybe because Watkins would have sold all of that as well, but their focus would have been relatively more about Eastern spirituality. Yeah, because of
Okay.
the background in theosophy. But they would have everything too. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you. That it does clear some things up. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a very interesting. I mean, because here we have this bookshop, which was basically his enterprise. He would actually be there every day almost, yeah, and he
Right.
had like a landing library and a small museum, yeah, in
Right.
there, and people would come to actually see him there in the bookshop. His daughter was also around to help with running the business, and there was like a manager and another assistant bookseller there. Yeah. Um,
There's
but
There's like a 3-second clip on YouTube of them standing in front of the bookshop. Yeah.
yeah.
It's like a really tantalizing shot and just like blink and you miss it kind of clip.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've been able to amass like from various archives. You have surviving catalogs and letters pertaining to the bookshop and all kinds of stuff. Specifically this one. So we're very fortunate in that. That's some things survived. Mostly we don't get that. But it's important as like an example of because um, many of the bookshops that I'm studying, they were founded by people who were, obviously interested in this side of things. Some of them were also practicing occultists, but they were operating these bookshops as a business and trying to stay afloat. Yeah, sometimes more successfully, sometimes not. But here in this case, it's someone like a benefactor, yeah, who is saying, okay, it's important for me that this subject of spiritualism is going to have its own bookshop, and I'm not really running this as an economically viable business. I'm just putting my money here. And you also have other types of bookshops which were operated by like spiritualist organizations or other kind of organizations. Yeah, like okay, the Theosophical Society bookshop, they had a string of bookshops. The Anthroposophical Society had a couple of bookshops too. Psychic News was a bookshop that was operated by like a spiritualist organization. So all of these like bookshops, I would assume, had different like business models. And you also have like bookshops that were more towards the radical side, which, they set up these bookshops as like sometimes as a cooperative. And by the way, Gail, I forgot to mention that I found like a couple of small archives of radical bookshops. I think one was in Manchester. I mean, it wasn't a Manchester bookshop, yeah, but grassroots books, yeah.
Yeah.
Their archive, it's like one box and it's preserved in Manchester, yeah, in the central library there. And it was really interesting to see because some of these radical bookstores also they had like an occult section. Why? Because it sold, yeah, and because one of the people running the cooperative was interested in occultism, yeah. And you can actually see specifically in that archive the debates between the people running the cooperative, fighting with each other. Why do we keep this new age bullshit? Yeah.
Yes.
Fighting with each other, and eventually one side won. Yeah, so they took off the new age stuff from the shelves. So that's again another interesting side of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, that does sort of lead on. Well, I had about 3 or 4 quick questions, but it does lead into one of the things that I was going to say and tell you. You may know. I mean, I was very involved with the setting up of Publications Distribution Co-op, which subsequently became Scottish and Northern, and was servicing the radical and alternative bookshops. Some of their archives is actually in the Working Class Museum Library in Manchester, and some of it is also in Glasgow Caledonian University. But I think, like you say about the overlap, or about the arguments, that's where you want to look in, the day books, the log books, where you can get hold of them of the individual bookshops. But there was the Federation of Radical Booksellers as well. And I was interested, I was involved with that. And I do remember Gothic Image from Glastonbury being part of that. But I don't know how many of the other, specifically occult bookshops might have been involved with that. So, you know, that's kind of another question. I wanted to know what your chapter in the book, what it was called, so that I could look it up later. And what was my other little point? Well, it's not a little point, potentially a big point, but can be a little point, is that I've done, I have a very uncompleted PhD where I look at Allen and Unwin, amongst others. And they published a woman in their very early days, a woman called Rose Alatini, who became a big theosophist. And this was the first time I'd ever come across theosophy. And yeah, so I'm just kind of interested a bit in where all of that kind of connects in as well.
Yeah, so please
I
complete
think
the
you
PhD so I can use it. Please.
well, it's a slightly different tack, but I think if you were to go back to Reading, then Allen and Unwin was a very eclectic publisher, and I think they probably may have, of all the straight, as it were, commercial publishers, they might well in the early days have published more than maybe some of the other commercial, you know, mainstream publishers.
Yeah. So Allen and Unwin is basically, that's the reason I went to Reading. Yeah. And there are just so many files which have, you know, correspondences with, you know, Watkins or about it. It's just full of it. Yeah. It's just so much stuff there. It's just an amazing archive. Yeah.
It is, yes, altogether amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gal. I'm conscious we just tipped over the 3 o'clock and we still have got, I think we still need to find out, don't we, from Shai before we let him go about how he got into this topic. But Gail, did you have a title for Gail, Shai, about the chapter? She asked if you've got a chapter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I just like 2 months ago submitted it to the editor. Yeah, so it's not that I have any doubt that it's going to get published or that the actual anthology will be published, but it will take a while. But it will be published by the Edinburgh University Press. And the title of my chapter, yeah, I'm just gonna and I can also tell you the title of the edited volume.
Yes, that would be helpful.
I'm just looking for it. So so my chapter is gonna be titled, for now at least, 20th Century Esoteric Bookselling in Scotland. Yeah. Pretty straightforward.
Esoteric subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the actual book is Modern Scottish Paganism, Ritual, Community, Belief.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully it's going to come out sometime next year.
Fantastic. All right. So Shai, to close this loop nicely, before we let you go, could you just tell us how you got into this amazing, fascinating area of research, please?
Yeah, so it will take 2 or 3 minutes. So that's why basically the start is like around 2008. I was finishing my BA in history and I knew that, okay, I really am enjoying this. I want to be an historian one day. What shall I write my MA thesis about? Now, and in that time I was playing this computer game called Return to Castle Wolfenstein, in which you play like an American operative in World War II trying to infiltrate this Nazi castle and prevent them from, you know, resurrecting demons and finding occult objects and whatever. Yeah. So it struck me that, you know, this game and movies like Indiana Jones or Hellboy are actually echoes in popular culture to the fascination of some people in the Nazi leadership in occult matters, like Himmler, for Heinrich Himmler, for instance, if we can think about that. And evidently there's been lots written about this. So I thought that I'm gonna write about that, but pretty soon I told myself, I'm not gonna learn German for 2 years and only then start working on the primary sources. Yeah. So if what I'm interested in is occultism, very broadly, not that I really knew what that's actually is at the time. I'm just going to transfer that to an English-speaking country, and then everything is somehow going to turn out okay. Yeah. So with this very vague notion, I went to do like a trip in the UK to clear my mind between the BA and the MA. I did a lovely walking trip in the northern part of the country, yeah, the coast-to-coast walk in the Lake District. And when I was afterwards in London, visiting the British Museum, just regular touristy things, I was exiting the museum, looking for the nearest tube station, and I was walking in Museum Street, and I found this bookshop, yeah, the Atlantis Bookshop. It had the words magic and occult, yeah, on the frontage. And I went inside and bought a few books, and that's for some reason, the bookshelves that most attracted me were the ones labeled goddess spirituality and paganism. And that basically started my MA research, which was about the history of or basically the influence of radical and cultural feminisms on the American feminist spirituality movement in the 70s and 80s. And then during the PhD, I wanted to see how all of these influences changed British Wicca, British paganism, how did they reacted to all of these developments, how the gender views about the deities and about the actual workings, in the covens, in the ritual groups, how all of that changed as a result of second wave feminism. So that became my book afterwards, after the PhD was done. So after that, I said, okay, let's return to the bookshop. Yeah, let's close the circle and come back to where it all began. Yeah, and that's how the project started, basically.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear more about what you do.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gail, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, can we have the reference then to because I'm also interested, of course, in the feminist book that,
Sure. So it's a book that was published in 2020 by Palgrave Macmillan. And the title is Women and Gender Issues in British Paganism, 1945 to 1990. It's ridiculously overpriced. Okay.
Yes, they always
Palgrave
are.
Macmillan, yeah, but so yeah, if somehow you can get it at like sometimes they do discounts and stuff like that, or I don't know, but yeah, it's like 100 euros. So
I have in fact published an article about the overpricing of radical books with particular reference to feminism, in fact. So
Brilliant,
yes.
Gail. Well, that is one to look at. I think the details, we've got them on the website on the little bit of blurb that we put up there as well, if you missed it.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Thank you so much, Shai. That was absolutely fascinating. Can't
Thank
wait to read the finished research, which I guess is going to be a book, is it? There must be enough there for a book. And then maybe we can have you back and you can sort of talk about the rest of the project. But meanwhile, sending love and hopes that you and your family and all people in Israel remain, well, if I say remain safe, it just seems I don't mean that an empty word, but to have you doing this from a safe place, from a safe room, it just brings it home how so thank you,
and I
genuinely.
also hope for like a speedy conclusion to the entire conflict, the entire war, so that peace and rebuilding somehow.
But thank you all. Thank you, Erin, for joining. Thank you, Gail, for coming, and as always, asking brilliant questions. And this is our last BRN session of this academic year, and we will be published. So we said at the start there we have exciting sessions coming up already for next year, apart from the conference in September. So we'll make an email sort of newsletter that'll come out hopefully in July for you all. But meanwhile, keep cool and stay safe. And thank you everybody for supporting the BRN this year. Thanks very much.